are able for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Morrison County Board. Today is March 28th, 2023. It is 9 o'clock, and we're going to get things started off. I'd like to look to Tabitha and ask if she has anything she'd like to add. Anyone else have anything to add or delete from the agenda? If not, I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion on the agenda. Hearing none. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. We'll then move into the consent agenda. I will ask the board if there's anything that anyone would like to have removed for further discussion on the consent agenda. If not, I would look for a motion.
Make a motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second that.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion on the consent agenda. That should be done. And then this is going to be a roll call vote. Commissioner Wincher.
Aye.
Commissioner Casper.
Aye.
Blaine.
Aye.
Lemire.
Aye.
And myself, Commissioner Jelinski, is an aye vote. That motion passes. We're going to move into item number 5 is the Motor Vehicle National Donate Life Proclamation. And Denise is not here for that one. Should we?
Yes,
Put
please.
that one? Okay, let's move on to the next one. We'll just put that one on hold. The next one is going to be the Great River Regional Library. I'm just going to say Karen and guests, and when you're seated at the table, if you will, if you'd pull your microphones down in front of you so we can all hear you, and then if we can introduce ourselves and carry on from there.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Jelinski. Good morning. I'm Karen Punsack. I'm the Executive Director for Great River Regional Library. Do you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Terry Deal Hansen. I'm the Library Services Coordinator at the Royalton Public Library.
I'm Marissa George. I'm the Library Service Coordinator for Uppsala.
Very good. Welcome, welcome.
Good morning.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And Karen, if you just want to take off, go ahead.
All right. Thank you. So some of you are familiar faces, but I know we have at least one new face to the county board, so welcome, Commissioner Casper. Yeah, nice to meet you. So Great River Regional Library is a 6-county library system, and we have Morrison County as one of our partners. We also have Todd, Stearns, Benton, Sherburne, and Wright. And here in Morrison County, we have 5 libraries that are part of that system. We run that system as a one library system, so we consider ourselves one library in 33 locations, and we share all of the books and collections and services across the entire region. Marissa actually also manages the Sauk Center Library, so we have a lot of shared staff as well. You can see on that first slide our mission, vision, and theory of change. That theory of change was a new part of our strategic plan last year. So we are committed to making sure people in our communities can find and use the trusted information they need to thrive every day. And that's a big part of what we do. And it happens in a lot of different ways. If you turn the slide to the next page, that's part of the annual report. You can see that I handed out today. One of our really big highlights last year is we had 18,000 new registered borrowers. So we've been trying to recover from COVID the last couple of years, and it was a rebuilding year last year. We continued to see a huge growth in our digital collections, but we are also seeing really strong use of our physical collections as well. And you can see the 5 libraries in Morrison County pictured on that slide. So we've got Little Falls, we've got Swanville, we've got Uppsala, Royalton, and then Piers right down on Main Street. So we have a pretty good coverage of the whole county. If you turn to the next slide, some of the highlights are on that second page of your annual report. One of the big stories, and Commissioner Wincher was part of our board for the last 8 years and has helped us move forward with what was probably the largest effort over the last 10 years. It's going fines-free on library materials. And what we learned was that it wasn't just a huge point of access. Like, it makes it easier for people who have a hard time getting to the library to get back to the library with their materials on their time. We also found it was a huge efficiency internally. And so we were able to remove credit card payment terminals and stopped paying credit card fees. We also collected a lot more in fines in lost materials and copies than we realized, because all of that revenue went into the same revenue line. We had actually anticipated about $40,000 in that revenue line for 2022, and we had a six-figure number there at the end of the year. Part of that is we still charge for lost books, so if people never bring them back, we still charge. But that was a huge access success last year for our patrons, and we're continuing to see growth. The other effort last year was something we've been talking about here at Morrison County since COVID hit, and that was we started circulating hotspots. That was a pilot project in Pierce with fund development dollars about 5 years ago. We are now to the point of circulating over 200 hotspots across the entire region. Every library has a hotspot. You can check it out for either 1 week or for 3 weeks, depending on which lending model you pick up. And that is available to you to use for free from home. That's something we were able to offer through our state telecommunications aid. So we're really excited about the growth of that project, and it's in really high demand, especially in our smaller communities out here. And then I'm going to turn over the rest of the story to Terry and Marissa, who really see what happens in our libraries behind the scenes and at the desk every day.
Very good, thank you.
Sure. So something that's been huge in Uppsala, not only is the Wi-Fi to go, increasing that internet access, but we also added a third internet station this past year, and we've had huge success with that. Most of the time in the mornings when we're open early, all 3 internet stations are filled. So having that internet access, answering questions, so for information requests, just having that access has been big for our community. And we do have Verizon as well as T-Mobile hotspots, because T-Mobile doesn't work well in all areas of our community. So finding that and making sure that we have coverage that works for everybody has been really big.
Wow, cool.
If you turn to the next slide, you can see some of the photos from your locations also. Thank you.
So you'll see with the Royalton photo, we have a picture of a local patron and artist, Voss Wojtonowicz. She's also a volunteer at the Royalton Public Library. And in March, for the month of March, Voss brought in about 12 of her art pieces and put them on display as an exhibit at the library. And at the same time, we handed out tiny art kits to patrons, to children and to adults to take home. There's a little canvas and an easel and some paints and paintbrushes. So then folks could paint their creations. Voss was the inspiration. They're going to bring them back, and then we'll display those in April and have our own tiny art show display. Marissa helped me out a lot with getting this all planned, as she had done this in the past. So stop at the Royalton Library and check it out. It's been so fun to see them start to come in, and they're all unique and creative and just really fun. So that's been a fun thing that has been happening in Royalton throughout March and April.
Cool.
And Grace couldn't be here today, but Grace Heschke runs our Piers Library, and that last photo is a photo of an intergenerational cribbage program that met 3 times in Piers last year. They had 15 regular participants, and they met throughout the summer. So, they use that space for a lot of different programming. She was also going to talk about their youth book club that met over the summer, and they also hosted the Minnesota Reptile and Amphibian Zoo and had 62 different kids come attend last summer. All of these things are possible because of the way our partnerships work, not only with the counties, but with state funding. So we want to just thank you for the support of the library system as a whole. The legacy funding is something that's up for vote again at the legislature. So if you're interested in helping advocate for library issues, know that that is something that needs to be reappropriated every 2 years. There's also a bill for regional library basic system support, which is 17% of Great River's budget. We're hoping that that funding becomes more stable and increases. There hasn't been an increase in state library funding since 2008. So a lot of the growth that we've been seeing has been coming from the local funding sources instead of the state level. And then the last bill that's down at the legislature right now is around library improvement grants. Thinking Little Falls received one a really long time ago, but that is a matching grant fund at the state level for capital improvement projects on libraries. So Howard Lake and Kimball are the two most recent recipients at Great River, but there's over $90 million of need across the state in terms of library buildings. The average library was built in 1954, I think, or something like that. So, those buildings do need to be maintained, and it's not easy to do. So it's good to have a matching grant fund. We're hopeful that that bonding bill will move forward. It should have been part of that normal bonding cycle in the last legislative session. So again, thanks to Commissioner Wenscher for being on our board, and he's our finance chair this year, so he's served a lot of different leadership roles across those 8 years he's been on the board. And if you have any questions about the library, we're happy to answer them.
I'd look to the board. Questions?
I have a question. Again, you brought up fines free, and that was a little bit to get across the finish line to do that. So how do I go about, I know the answers to these questions, but how do I go about knowing if I have a book that's not be able to turn in? Do I drive to my local library, or can I go online? That's one question. Number two, what happens if I do have a book that's late? Can I check out other books?
You guys want to take that?
Sure. Okay, so
All
I'll take
together now.
the second part of the question. So if you have a book that's overdue, it's 10 days? 10 days, we'll get a little, you won't be able to check out other books until you return those books. There are exceptions. If you say you just put that book in the book drop, we can, work around some of those things. But you are required to turn those items in before you can continue checking out other items as a way to, encourage folks to get them in a timely manner so the next person who's waiting would be able to pick that up.
And as far as the first part of the question, you can call the library. Any of our branches, we do have a 1-800 number you can call as well. You can call our hotline. You can check your account online. We have many people email us too, so yeah, we'd be happy to help. However,
You get a notification in the mail by any chance?
you will get a notification in the mail too if it's that far overdue. And sometimes those notifications go out from headquarters and the book gets returned in the meantime, or the material gets returned in the meantime. So sometimes we do have people bring their paper in and say, I returned this. Well, sorry, you just returned it yesterday. This was mailed out like 3 days ago, so thank you.
And when I said as chair too on the Great River, I got a lot of emails about, I got $40 worth of fines and I can't bring my book back, so this fine's free. I guess they could, but this fine's free. We've had programs get them back in, so it's worked very well for the Great River Library. So I want to thank every one of you, and plus the other staff out there, so thanks.
Thank you.
Anything further from the board? Karen, ladies, thank you very much. Very nice that you come. You stop in once a year. Karen usually surprises us, and today she did. She brought two other librarians with her, so thank you very much, and look forward to the next time that you stop in.
All right, thank you very much.
Here, thank you.
And then I'm going to look at this agenda, and I'm going to go backwards in time, and I'm going to say we need to talk about the Motor Vehicle National Donate Life Proclamation. Good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
Good news.
Thank you, Denise. That's good.
All right, Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, and Denise,
Thanks
if you would
for-
be so kind as to introduce yourself, where you're from, so on and so forth, and
Sure.
take off.
I'm Denise Vogel. I'm a supervisor at the DMV here at the county. I am here today to talk about National Donate Life Awareness Month, which is upcoming here in April. And to kick off our little proclamation, I would like to show you a little video that we have.
Sure.
Bear with me, sorry Denise, I had it all queued up and now it wants to act up, so take me 1 second.
It's technology, it's okay. You know, most people just kid when they say a short video. Thank you.
Yes, you're
Very good.
welcome. Figured it kind of gets the point across that it doesn't matter your age or your health or who you are, that everybody can donate. In fact, just a fun fact that the oldest organ donator was 95 years old. So, yeah, anybody can donate. And it's a matter of whether it's tissue or eyes or organs. There's several different areas that you may fall under regardless of your health. So just so people are aware of that. Also, each day, 17 people die waiting for life-saving organ transplant. And a new name is added to the transplant waiting list every 9 minutes. So think about that. That's a lot. Together, our partners, donor families, and community, we work towards one goal, that no one dies waiting. So it's a strong message that's going across. And obviously, I work with the driver's license area, and in driver's license, there is a box you can check. And so that is why I'm here today, is to talk about that a little bit, along with doing the National Donate Life Awareness Month in April coming up. I have in front of you guys that I had handed out the proclamation, and I'm just going to read it to you. National Donate Life Awareness Month, established by Donate Life America and its partnering organizations in 2003. Observed in April each year to help raise awareness about donation, encourage Americans to register as organ, eye, tissue donors, and to honor those that have saved lives through the gift of donation. Please join Morrison County to help us honor donors, recipients, and their families and caregivers, also recognizing the clinical teams continuing their dedication work during this time to help honor the gift of donation and to save lives of those waiting for a second chance at life. Our efforts in promoting organ, eye, and tissue donations and the importance of registering your decision when applying for your driver's license or ID or donating to support education. Join in the Awareness Days of 2023. Upcoming is April 5th, is Donating Life Living Donor Day. April 8th starts the Blue and Green Spirit Week. And April 14th is National Donate Life Blue and Green Day, which our staff does participate in that by wearing blue and green that day. And we're going to do a little potluck with some green and blue food that day. So kind of some fun things going on. Along with April 23rd and 29th is National Pediatric Transplant Week. So I'm asking that Morrison County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim April of 2023 as National Donate Life Awareness Month.
I would look to the board for a motion.
I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Commissioner Wincher.
Dumb question, Denise.
Yeah.
I've been down to DMV many times or over to where it is now. So, is this something that we offer when somebody comes in and renews their driver's license? Do you want to be a donor? Do we ask? And do you guys have pictures down there? And again,
Yeah, there is actually brochures and stuff that are on the tables, but also when you fill out your driver's license application, that specific question is on there.
right, I know that, but then you don't reiterate and say when so you don't want to be a donor, you probably can't do that. They check no.
Yeah, you cannot, yeah,
All right, thank you.
yeah.
Further questions from the board? Denise, I'll ask. Very often, this is a critical event that could happen. You're waiting for a kidney. I'm just making that up. There's a traffic crash, and bang, bang, boom, that's just how it works. Is there a time limit, or don't you know? Let's just pretend that somebody passes away, and a day later, they're found that they have passed away. They are a donor. Is there still interest in testing or for somebody at that point in time? Or,
To be honest, I don't know the answer to
Okay.
that question.
okay.
Yeah.
But you know where I'm coming from?
Yes, I do.
Okay, very good.
Yep.
Nothing further from the board. We've got a motion, a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Denise, thank you very much for your time. Very good program, very important. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
thank you.
Mr. Chair, if we can have Denise come up and take a photo with the
Oh,
proclamation.
absolutely, please. Denise gets to be in front.
You get to hold up the proclamation.
In the middle.
Right in the middle, see the middle of the table right
Okay.
there? There you go.
Does this look right? Okay, Zach's gonna tell us.
Just gonna say, I'm gonna have to have, yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Aside a little. There you go. There we go.
Like so?
Better?
There we go.
How's this?
That looks great.
Take a look at that.
All right, 1, 2, 3. I'll do a second one just in case somebody blinked. 1, 2, 3.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Say hi to the gals down there.
All right, let's see, I think Lori is next. And Lori is here this morning from the Council of Aging. And Lori, I would ask if you would take a seat, please. Position your microphone for us so we can all hear, and everybody else that is listening. And then if you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself, what you're here for, so on and so forth.
Yes, so I'm Lori Burleson with the Central Minnesota Council on Aging. And so usually I come here and I ask you guys for money. And this time I'm not asking you guys for money. So I'm here today to talk with you about the interstate funding formula. And that is the process that the state of Minnesota, the Minnesota Board on Aging, receives the federal and state, the Federal Older Americans Act funding, and then the state nutrition dollars. So annually, there's about $20 million of Federal Older Americans Act funding that the Minnesota Board on Aging receives, and then state nutrition dollars. And then those dollars get distributed to the 6 area agencies on aging, and then the 1 tribal area agency on aging. And then that funding is used then to fund things such as nutrition, home-delivered meals, transportation, congregate dining, chores, homemaker, caregiver supports, services that really work to keep older adults in their own homes and support family caregivers. And if you go to the next slide, so in particular, the Council on Aging, of that $20 million through the interstate funding formula, we receive annually about 13.68% of that, based on the interstate funding formula. And with that, if you look at this data here, this is last year's information in terms of what we actually, the impact of that, of those dollars. So with that funding, we reached about 31,000 older adults in our 14-county area. So about 1 in every 5 older adults in our region was impacted in one way or the other through the Older Americans Act services. We have about 176,000 older adults in our 14-county area. If you go to the next slide, I have broken out for you specifically in Morrison County, what was the impact of the Older Americans Act services for Morrison County. About $237,703 were invested in Morrison County specifically last year. You'll see through here, 822 individuals were connected through long-term care options counseling from senior linkage. 90 older adults received 1,250 rides. That was typically rides by, in particular, that was from Horizon Faith in Action for rides to doctor's appointments, mainly 8 individuals with chores, 9 with homemaking, 31 older adults, multi-week health promotion classes, 414 individuals received 26,240 meals. That would have been both congregated and home-delivered meals. Our 2 providers in this area for meals are both Lutheran Social Services and Catholic Charities. And those are, we have kind of 3 types of meals that we're providing right now. Both traditional congregate meals, traditional home-delivered meals for homebound individuals where there are daily home-delivered meals that are being provided. And then we're also doing frozen meals that are happening in bundles through some of the food shelves and nutrition assistance sites that are targeting low-income seniors, where on the food commodity days, Catholic Charities is providing food bundles where low-income seniors can, at those food shelves and the NAP sites, can pick up bundles of up to 20 frozen meals through Catholic Charities and take those home with them in addition to the food commodities. So that's where the 26,000 meals comes in to the 414 individuals. And then 54 individuals with legal counsel through St. Cloud Legal Services through their senior law project with 177 hours of legal counsel. And then through Horizon Health, once again, 75 family caregivers with caregiver coaching, respite, and in support groups. So that's specifically for individuals from Morrison County, how those individuals locally here were impacted with the Older Americans Act programs. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk just a little bit about who decides how the formula and the formula is enacted. So at the federal level, the Administration on Community Living has directed the Minnesota Board on Aging, which is a division of the department. It's a governor-appointed board at the state level that serves as a state unit on aging. They have to develop the interstate funding formula. They have not updated the interstate funding formula for 20 years, and the Administration on Community Living has directed them that they do need to update this interstate funding formula. And so they have been gathering feedback from the area agencies on aging, from the directors, and they have met with our board and our advisories, and they are in process now of gathering public comment. They have to provide a draft to ACL by July 1st of this year. So April 3rd, they'll be putting the interstate funding formula on for public comment. If we can go to the next slide. So we are on draft 5 right now of a version of the interstate funding formula. And if you can see here where the current weights that they have, the factors and the weights that the state has been using. So with the formula, the state has developed what they are laying out as factors and as weights. And as they have progressed through this process, they have played around with different factors and weights. And through this progression, we have made some headway, I would say, in making gains in supporting services for Greater Minnesota with increasing the rural factor and the population density ratios, and also adding weights to the living alone. In the original factor, it was much more heavily weighted on the 60+, and yet our older Americans, our older adults that we're serving through our Older Americans Act funding tend to be, our average age is 80+. I mean, they tend to be more older adults that are frail and living alone, and our current factors are very heavily weighted on the eligibility, which is 60+. So we, through each iteration of the revision to this funding formula, we are making progress. But as you look at the next slide, what you'll see is that, actually, we'll go to the next slide after this. And we'll go to the next slide, I'm sorry. I'm going to skip ahead just because of time. And you can't see this very well, but what you'll see is, if you can pull this up a little bit, what you'll see is that the implications, if you look in the middle column here, for the rural area agencies on aging is pretty substantially at a loss. If you look at the Central Minnesota Council on Aging, we will fare out fairly in comparison to rural for the outstate AAAs. We will fare out fairly even keel. We'll gain $111,000. But if you look at the other outstate AAAs, they're losing between $500,000 to $284,000, $403,000. We really see a shifting of almost $700,000 to the Metro Area Agency on Aging. And my ultimate concern with this is that we're going to see a crippling of at least 2 of the outstate area agencies on aging. And I think what we'll end up seeing is it's going to lead to the future additional consolidation of outstate area agencies on aging. And for those of you that may recall, we have already seen a consolidation of area agencies on aging. I have been here for going on 30 years, and we used to have 14 area agencies on aging. This region here used to be part of Region 5 Regional Development Commission. And there used to be the Region 5 Regional Development Commission, Region 7E Regional Development Commission, and then it was the Stearns, Benton, Sherburne, and Wright Central Minnesota Area Agency on Aging. And then those 3 areas combined into one area agency on aging. There was no new dollars that came into that mix. It was just, there was a consolidation of 3 area agencies on aging. And with what is going on with this scenario, we're going to see, I believe we're going to see that happening again, where we're going to see further consolidation of area agencies on aging in outstate Minnesota. And it will be greater territory, but no new dollars. And unless there is, once again, the interstate funding formula that has heavier weights placed on supporting rural Minnesota. And so my request to the county board and to you as individual county commissioners is that when the interstate funding formula gets put on public comment, is to provide public comment to support an interstate funding formula that supports rural Minnesota. And that the final formula that they'll be putting out will be released on the 3rd. I am not certain of what that formula will look like. And so what my intent will be is that I can provide Matt with a copy of what that looks like, and I can provide a draft recommendation of a sample, some sample comments. We will be providing on our website some sample language and recommendations as well. But I strongly just encourage support for comments to support rural Minnesota. Are there questions on that?
I appreciate the conversation very much. Thank you. I'll look to the board. Commissioner Blaine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lori, my initial question here is, does this agency, and you said there is the individuals who serve on this are governor appointed, do they have to, if they reconfigure that request for spending or appropriation, does that have to go through the legislature? Does that that funding and or the direction with this, how this is broken down, does the legislature have approval on that before it becomes law, or is that agency independent on their own and they'll make that decision themselves?
Yeah, it does not go through the legislature. They make that decision.
So
it does go through, they have to receive approval from the Administration of Community Living. So they develop a draft proposal, and then it does have to receive the approval from the Administration of Community Living at the federal level.
Okay, so there is another review of this.
There is another review.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. Yeah, we'll look forward to that opportunity to give input on this, and obviously this will, with the information that we've seen from the state demographer and the increasing numbers of our population that are falling into the senior category, we'll have, this is an area that will have great interest by this board in making sure we're taking care of our senior community and that we have the resources to do that. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions from the board?
I just want to make a point on this one. Can you go to this pie chart, please? It looks like rural Minnesota serves more older adults than the metro area does.
Yes, so on that pie chart, when I was doing the analysis for the interstate funding formula, it was one of the things that in that analysis that I found interesting, and I was really kind of quite surprised with. So our 14 county area, as I said, we receive 13.68% of the interstate funding, of the funding. So that includes both the Federal Older Americans Act and the state nutrition funding. And when we look at our largest category of funding is our nutrition. So we receive 13% of the nutrition funding, but statewide, when we look at all the older adults that were received senior meals in 2021, our 14 counties provided 20% of all the older adults that received meals. And yet we received 13% of the allocation, which to me shows the disproportion, one of the flaws in the interstate funding formula.
And, I mean, that's something that they could easily do and they could look at is how many we serve out in rural Minnesota versus the metro area, and then the funding can be allocated proportionately that way.
So when you think about when you think about the resources that are available, I mean, in outstate, we just don't have and I'm speaking to the choir, but I mean, when you look in the communities out here, you don't have the grocery stores, you don't have the restaurants, you don't have the places for people to acquire the food that you do in the metro area. And so then the distance for people to get the resources is so much greater. And so it's not always the models to deliver the models of service delivery are very different, the needs are very different, and so it's not, you can't just look at the number of low-income seniors or the total number of seniors. You have to also, there's so many factors that come into play with it, and you have to look at that as an aggregate. And that's why when I say the needs for Greater Minnesota need to be reflected in this funding formula, and they're not. And that's why I think this pie chart, I think, really illustrates, and I use the nutrition as the example because that is our largest category of funding when it comes to the Older Americans Act allocation. And it is also impacting both the state and the federal allocation.
Very good. And yeah, I encourage you to send them statements that you'd like us to send to the board on April 3rd, and we'll send them in.
Thank you.
From Morrison County.
So Laurie, what I would like to do is to go to the next slide, if we could, and I would like you to comment. Well, maybe it's the next one. Of course not. Nope. Back. This one right here. No, yeah. But I have more on mine. I have, on my slide, it says provide input during the public comment period. Where's that at? It's not on that.
Oh, right here? Jeff, on the bottom? Oh,
This one right here. Oh, there you. Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. If, Lori, if you could comment on this a little bit for me. I'm a little bit concerned. I've heard the term 60 plus. I just need to know, is that 60 years of age plus?
Yes.
What's 60 plus?
Yes, it's 60, so the funding formula, what they're looking at is the funding formula itself has factors and weights in its age 60 plus, and so they're looking at one of the factors being age 60 plus, and then age 60 plus with disability, age 60 plus living alone.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's age 60 plus.
So the black area or the dark letters of paragraph, it starts out with decrease, the 60-plus population to 20%, decrease 60-plus with disability. Can you comment on that paragraph?
So it's the weighting. So it's how it's weighted so that so if you look in terms of where the line where it says MBA proposed, where it says the 60-plus population, so that
Yeah.
where it says, so the 60-plus, so instead of it being the 60-plus at 30%, decrease that to 20%, so that we can shift the weighting.
Yeah.
So instead of so the Board on Aging has the 60-plus being weighted at 30%.
Yep.
Decrease that to 20%, so that we can shift that, and then move that over, so you're increasing the 60-plus rule factor by another 5%.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay,
So,
20% of the pie,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and then we're increase the rural to 15 to 25.
I believe this board, myself, and I believe this board will support what you're talking about, and I would suggest to get that information to Matt. I don't know that we need to have a motion for that, it's just a support letter. And I think a nod is enough for that.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
And I think that we need to support this, and the big reason behind that is, if we don't start supporting our 60-plus, if you will, for terminology, and continuing to do that, we're going to take a gigantic step backwards, and I don't think this board or any other board should look at it that way. So I appreciate the information. Commissioner Wincher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, that one, where you had all what the Council of Aging does, the volunteer driving, that always sticks out at me. And it shows that you had 90, or what the heck, yeah, 90-some rides. And how does one person become a volunteer to that, if they want to, take somebody to a doctor's appointment, what, yeah, 98, for 90 and
oh, sure,
90 older adults receive 1,250 rides.
Yeah.
How does one get onto that program? How does, I see, they all are great things that is being done, impacted in the county, but that one always jumps at me, because there's a lot of seniors out there that just can't get around. So how does one become a driver?
sure. So in Morrison County here, our contract for the transportation is with Horizon Health, with their Faith in Action, and they have volunteers that do transportation, handyman, doing chores, homemaker, respite. And so, if people want to volunteer, they would simply contact Christine Hoheisel at Faith in Action and speak with her about volunteering. And then we reimburse them for their services. So even whether they use paid staff or volunteers, it doesn't matter. We reimburse them for their services.
And then this is a question that you probably don't know, but I know it's come up in the past about insurance, whether the provider who, takes that senior, whoever, does their insurance pay for that, or do you have to have extra insurance? I don't think that was a legislator thing. I don't know if you ever heard anything about that?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of, and we still are doing advocacy around that. So, with the whole rideshare thing, we did get that straightened out. So with the volunteers, that got straightened through with the state legislature 2 sessions ago. So volunteer drivers are classified as volunteers, and so they're not classified, they cannot be classified as ride share, so they're not caught up in that Uber or Lyft. And so on their personal insurance policies, they are not classified as an Uber or Lyft driver. Right now, we're working at the federal level on the mileage issue. So what happens right now is that if a volunteer is driving, so for example, we do reimburse, I mean, part of, like, if a program, they can include in their reimbursement to the volunteers mileage reimbursement, and we encourage them to reimburse up until the business rate. Unfortunately, based on federal law, anything over 14 cents for a volunteer is taxable income. So even though a volunteer is driving, anything over 14 cents is taxable. So that is something that we're working, Stauber's office has a bill that's has been proposed to bring that up to the business rate, and it should be. I mean, people should be able to volunteer and not be taxed on that. And that is a big deterrent for people to volunteer and to be volunteering for a variety of purposes. So that is something that we're working on at the federal level right now for advocacy.
Great information, thank you.
Further questions, concerns, comments from the board? Commissioner Casper?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just say, Lori, you know, I work with you, and I'd like to thank you, even on behalf of the board, for all your hard work on this, because that population, someone mentioned it, it's growing, and there's a deeper need all the time, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
You're doing a good work for the Lord.
Very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good enough. Anything further?
Thank you,
Lori,
Lori.
thank you very kindly. I appreciate
Thank you.
a lot of
Appreciate
good
everything.
information. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. All right, we're going to move right along to Health and Human Services. Katie is with us this morning. Katie, if you'd be so kind as to take a seat, pull the microphone down in front of you, introduce yourself, and carry on.
Very good.
Morning, Katie.
Good morning, Katie Canetto, Health and Human Services. Here with a couple things this morning. The first one being the Child Protection and Out-of-Home Placement Report. So I'll start with that. I just wanted to kind of highlight what our year in 2022 looked like with child protection. That first slide shows continually high numbers of intakes. As we were here, maybe a month and a half ago, we added an intake position, and this is part of the reason why we continue to see high numbers of reports, particularly here referencing in child protection. Just to kind of orient the board, those reports come from mandated reporters and people who are voluntary reporters as well. So mandated reporters are people who are obligated to make reports as part of their job. And so that can be doctors, teachers, coaches, people like that. Otherwise, we get reports from family members, neighbors, friends. Once a report comes into our agency, we have to screen that within 24 hours. When we conduct our screening, we look at the state guidelines that are provided and determine if the report meets criteria to be screened in for a child protection assessment. So 16% of those reports ultimately got screened in 2022, and the rest were screened out. When we screen out reports, sometimes we do reach out to families and offer voluntary services, or they might be on the cusp, and so there are some other voluntary services that we can offer, including parent support outreach. Parent support outreach is available for families who have a child where the mother is either pregnant or there's a child under the age of 10, and they have a couple of risk factors going on in the family. And that's a grant-funded program, and so we are able to help them address barriers that maybe are leading to some of these concerning calls that we're getting in hopes of avoiding child protection involvement down the road. A couple other voluntary services is minor parent assessment. Hospitals report when somebody who under the age of 18 gives birth, and we reach out to the family to check in with them, make sure that they have what they need. Oftentimes, these young moms are living with their parents still, and so they have support, but that's not always the case. And so it's those that maybe don't have support systems in place that we can stay open a little bit longer and offer that and make sure that they're connected with the things they need.
Katie, can I stop you right there?
Yeah.
I just want to ask, does money have anything to do with this? And as I say that, is maybe the 18-year-old is living with mom and dad, and maybe there is a financial hurt and maybe there isn't, does it matter?
No, it doesn't matter. As far as us meeting with them, we meet with everybody. Anybody who's under the age of 18, regardless of family situation, finances, or anything, that's just a requirement from the state. To stay open, though, it will depend if there's a need, which could be financial or otherwise.
Yep, very good. Thank you very much for that.
And then I also have listed on there extended foster care. That is a voluntary service at the other end of the youth spectrum. So when kids age out of foster care, which means on their 18th birthday, they are still in the foster care system, they are able to be part of extended foster care where they can continue in care up to 21. Now, care doesn't necessarily mean that they're with one of our foster parents living in their home. It could be. But it could also mean that we're providing some financial support to them to maybe live in a dorm and go to college, or live in an apartment and work full-time. They do have to be cooperative with either attending school or working in order to be part of the program, right? We don't want to just be providing without effort. So this is us supporting these youth to be successful in their transition to adulthood. And then the next slide just talks about back to those 16% of reports that we screen in for assessments. Generally, when we complete those, the majority of our assessments do close. We are able to provide services to family, correct conditions that led to our involvement. There are families that need longer support. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'm not even following. So here. So yes, in 2022, we had 148 of those that were opened into assessments. So that's what that 16% equates to. And then the majority of those are family assessment. I know I've talked before, but sometimes it's helpful when you only hear from me once a year on this matter to just give a little bit of explanation. But in child protection, there's two tracks. The traditional child protection investigations was kind of the original way of doing things. That's where a social worker goes with law enforcement. There's recorded interviews taken. There's a determination, did this occur or did it not? Family assessment is something that came up. It's been about 20 years now, but that is the preferred method of child protection. And really, that is how we handle most cases. Family assessment, sometimes law enforcement's involved if we feel there's a concern or a need for that, but generally it's a more family-friendly approach where you're not, did you do this, didn't you do this? It's what's going on with your family, how can we help you, how can we make things safer and prevent future reports from coming in. So you can see that's the vast majority of our assessments that we do is 70%. The 29 is still those traditional investigations. The state requires us to do traditional investigations with certain types of reports. So if you have shaken baby, a sexual abuse case, those really egregious harm, there's statute around predatory offenders living in the home, those all have to be done the traditional way. But the majority of ours are done through family assessment. And then also on there, just a small percent at 1% is facility investigations. So those are investigations that occur when there's maltreatment reported in a daycare or a licensed foster home. So we have to conduct those as well. The types of allegation, continue to be, neglect is always the top one. And probably the biggest reason for that is there's a variety of types of neglect, right? There can be unsafe home conditions where, there's maybe things in the home that are hazardous to children. It's lack of supervision. It's educational neglect when kids aren't getting to school, and it's drug use. So all of that encompasses neglect. So that by far is our biggest maltreatment type when we're screening in assessments, followed by, the types of abuse, and then threatened injury. Those are again with the predatory offenders when there's somebody who maybe hasn't sexually abused the child they're living with, but has been accused of it previously, and therefore they're a threat or a risk to the child in their current household. So the state requires that we see children timely when we're screening in assessments, which makes sense, right? If we've identified there's a concern, we better be getting out there and checking on these kids. So in those traditional type investigations, we have to see the kids within 24 hours. With the family assessments, we have to see them within 120 hours. That being said, now, if we have a family assessment where there's concern about a parent using meth in the home, we're not gonna wait 120 hours to go see those children. We're often seeing those children, within a few hours that same day as well, because we plan our responses to correlate with the safety and risk factors to the children. So in 2022, there were 179 children that were victims of maltreatment, and we saw 176 of those children within the required time frame, whether that's the 24-hour or the 120 or 24 hours. The three that weren't seen in that timeline, parent cooperation or non-cooperation was a factor. So back to where I was trying to jump, about 5 slides ago, was into case management. So like I said, the majority of our assessments opened we address concerns and they are closed without ongoing services being needed. Some families need more support, and so these 50 case management cases in 2002 are those, or 22, are those families that need longer term support. As you can see on the next slide, a lot of these families are the ones that end up in placement. So we had 33 that were placement cases. We had 12 that weren't involved in court or placement. They're just working with us voluntarily. And then there's a handful that are involved in court, but there's no placement. So those are situations that, they're kind of right on the cusp. They might need some jurisdiction from the court to get things accomplished to keep kids safe in the home. Specific to those group of kids that are in placement, so on the last slide, we were talking about the families, so that's why you see the difference in numbers. So there were 33 families that had kids in placement, but the actual numbers is that there were 72 kids in foster care last year as a result of child maltreatment. We have other reasons for foster care. Once kids are state wards, right, they're waiting for adoption, or if there's disability placements, but I'm strictly referring to the child protection placements here. And so the majority of them are placed with relatives. 33 of those kids were with relatives last year. 11 went with their non-custodial parent, and so sometimes we can make those arrangements happen without placement or court involvement. Sometimes if the custodial parent isn't willing, we still have to go through court, and so that does count as a placement because that is time away from the custodial parent. So 11 kids were able to go with their other parent, and then 28 were with were in homes that were not relatives to them. So I compared the numbers for 21 and 22 on this slide together just because I thought it was interesting as I was pulling data. There was some discrepancy and I was kind of puzzled at first, but if you can see in 2022, we had a lot more kids that were reunified with their parents than the prior year. And then on the other end, where we're talking about those kids that remain in care, again, in 2021, we had a lot more, which makes sense because we weren't sending them home. And so when I was kind of thinking about that, I broke down on the next slide, kind of the two that kind of stood out the most was the number of children in child protection placement and then completed adoptions, because, right, that's when kids often linger is once they become state wards. I should say previously that's when they would linger, as they become state wards and they're waiting to be finalized with an adoptive family. And so what I noticed when looking at the data was just that in 2021 we had quite a few long-standing child protection cases. Courts were giving multiple extensions to parents. And so it was taking longer to get them to that where they were available to be adopted. And also, we have a different representative at the state that's approving our adoption paperwork now, and it's going much more smoothly. And so they are approving those adoptions much quicker, and I'll talk about that more in November when I bring my adoption report. But I just thought it was of note in looking at these numbers. So the next slide talks about the cost. And so, again, just a reminder that the child protection out-of-home placement budget is, or the child protection piece of the out-of-home placement budget is just apart. And so the CP placement there is listed in the kind of bluish purple in front, and the total cost in the yellow also accounts for those kids as state wards, kids who have disabilities who are in placement, and also the correctional kids. That all falls in the same out-of-home placement budget. And so the thing to keep in mind too is, like our budget in 2022 was higher, our out-of-home placement for child protection than in 2021. But if you look back at that graph where I was kind of showing the discrepancies, we had more kids going home last year, which might seem counterintuitive, but actually paying for foster care, right? The money we give to foster parents to reimburse them for providing like the care day to day is not the biggest part of our out-of-home placement costs. We are providing a lot of support to parents to make things better in their home so that it's safe for children, and breaking down barriers. And so that could be transportation, that could be, physical needs within the home, and all of those things, cost a lot of money. And so it makes sense then when you look that we sent more kids home, that we had foot a bigger cost to help support those families to be successful in their reunification with their children. And of course, we continue, if you look back, I don't have my slides number, I apologize, but the numbers of placements are not increasing themselves. So the number of kids we have in placement, we really continue to strive to keep kids in their homes at all costs. And when we are not able to do that, we are also looking at relatives or other options before we even take these cases to court, because we recognize, that out-of-home placement is traumatic and really is strictly used as a last resort. So what questions does the board have?
Katie, when you talked about the 24 hours and the 120 hours, I'm very familiar with the fact that that sounds good. Is it really 24 hours? Can you talk to the board just briefly, if you will, is that you're also on call.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that no one knows when an ugly event is going to take place and where Health and Human Services need to be called in. So when that ugly event happens, and you're at home, because it's not 8 to 5, if you will, what takes place? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so right now we have it set up that we're on call, and that's filtered through the sheriff's department or through dispatch. And so dispatch will notify us if they get a call from either a report or if one of law enforcement is responding to something that needs immediate attention. They reach out to the on-call supervisor. That's kind of our first layer of on-call. We have two layers. And so, we address or handle whatever we can. But if it's determined that somebody needs to come in and conduct an interview right away, then we reach out to that second layer of on-call, which is my investigative staff. And they're the ones that are trained to do the forensic interviews. So they would come in and partner with law enforcement to do those at any hour of the night or day or weekend.
Very good. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. Comments from the board? Commissioner Blaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Katie, I'm going to ask you a question that you'll probably look at as being difficult, but I have to ask this. So we look in your presentation. You have 179 maltreatment cases that were investigated in 2022. That's over 3.5 children a week that were, and that's every week that averages out to. Every week we have over 3.5 children that we're having to address with these numbers. So I guess the question I have to ask is, and I'm not sure if you even have if there's even time within your staff, but do we have a strategy or thoughts on what we can do to curb these numbers? I know because of the numbers and because of the staff that you have and the demands on your staff, you guys have to act in a reactionary mode. I'm just curious if there is other stakeholders outside of the work that you do, but people that you work with out there, that look at making an effort to try and somehow curb these numbers, that we have intervention with families, whether it's through law enforcement, whether it's through houses of faith or whatever, you know. Can you comment on that at all to me?
Yeah, so you're right. Child protection is strictly responsive. You know, there's not a lot of options for, prevention. However, there are other groups within our agency and community. So the Morrison County Family Connections team is one of our community groups that does focus on prevention. And so we offer the Circle of Parents Support Group. We have a Facebook page that has a lot of parenting tips, resources, things like that. And so a lot of our prevention is focused kind of is managed through that group. Because we recognize, prevention is key. And in child protection, by the time the reports come to us, it's too late. We have to respond. There's nothing to do about those, but to try to get information. And that is too why we offered, I talked about those voluntary services. For those families that aren't screened in today, we might recognize, ooh, this is close, or the next report might be an in. So that's why we're offering those voluntary services in hopes that we can prevent them coming in the door for child protection and keep them in the voluntary side and just helping them with what they need before it gets to that point.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Commissioner Lemire.
Continue with that. You do help after the fact, though, with assistance with, like you said, rides and stuff like that. So you might not be preventing the first incident, but you're working to prevent the second incident.
Absolutely. And that is our goal, really, to prevent repeat maltreatment from occurring. And so, yes, that is why we spend a lot of time with these families. Often the ones that we open, they're open. If they don't close during that assessment period, we're open with them for several months because we don't want it to just be, okay, if it couldn't have been resolved during the assessment period, we recognize this family probably can't do it on their own, and they do need some additional support from us, and so we want to ensure that we're staying in long enough, that we're making a change so it doesn't happen again. You're exactly right.
Thank you, Katie.
Great report, Katie. Anything further from the board? Commissioner Wincher.
Throw this out there. Now, there's 176 children. Are these from past, again, the number that child was maybe assessed 3 years ago? Are they rolled over continuously? Or are these new cases in the county?
So these children are all somebody that crossed our threshold in 2022. Now, that being said, yes, we could have had involvement with them in 21, 2019, in past years. It's not necessarily, yes, there's some new people moving into our community, but so I don't have good numbers on if this is the first time they've ever been involved with us or not.
But it could be.
It could be either.
All right, thank you.
Excellent. Nothing further from the board? Katie, thank you very, very much. Look forward to November.
Yes.
And in between.
Yes, right?
All right.
And then I do have one other thing, looking for authorization to backfill the WIC coordinator position. So the WIC coordinator does the planning, implementation, and evaluation for the WIC program. We currently have about 660, 670 participants per month that the WIC coordinator manages. So looking for authorization on that.
My thought is go for it.
I'm good with it, Mr. Chair.
That's very important.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. All right, next item of business is item number 9 on our agenda. I'm going to look to the sheriff. And the sheriff has Victoria with him today. Sheriff, Victoria, if you want to take a chair, put a microphone in front of you, tell us who you are, and take off.
Sure. So Sheriff Sean Larson. Victoria.
Good morning, Victoria McKissick.
Good morning.
So I'm actually here for 3 separate items. The first one is the Morrison County All Hazard Mitigation Plan. Then I just kind of I don't want to go into my monthly report, but I just want to kind of talk a little bit about some training that we got last month regarding mental health for our own staff. And then the third thing was just a couple of resignations. So we'll start with the resolution to adopt the Morrison County All Hazard Mitigation Plan. This was sent out for our regular agenda. And basically, we'll just kind of go through the plan, and then, of course, I'm going to need the county board chair signature.
Sure.
So the plan was put together by our planning team, and it's required that we have a plan updated every 5 years by FEMA, and then, of course, the Homeland Security Emergency Management. The plan addresses natural hazards that may potentially face Morrison County, and it identifies mitigation actions that will help reduce or eliminate the impact of future hazard events. So I have our emergency manager with, Victoria McKissick. She's kind of going to talk about the planning team, who that all consists of, and just give a little synopsis of the plan.
Excellent. Thank you, Sheriff. Victoria, feel free.
Good morning. As Sheriff Larson said, the Morrison County Multi-Hazard Mitigation Plan is required to be updated every 5 years by FEMA and the Minnesota Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Our last plan was due, and we started this process back in July of 2021. It's typically a 14 to 18-month process and requires a lot of input from the county, and it's a multi-jurisdictional plan that covers not only Morrison County, but includes as far as the cities within Morrison County. And then it also incorporates the concerns and needs of townships, school districts, and other stakeholders participating in the plan. The plan, as Sheriff Larson said, consisted of a planning team, which included Morrison County Emergency Management, as well as our county administrator, Health and Human Services Director and his staff, Land Services Director and her staff, Public Works, so it incorporated all different departments within Morrison County, as well as representatives from the cities, townships, school districts, all stakeholders within, excuse me, Morrison County. So we're basically at the end of the planning process. We've put together our hazard mitigation plan update, which is a 248-page document. And at this time, we would basically be, we're working toward as far as adopting the plan. Moving, I apologize, my voice, allergies. But some of the examples of hazard mitigation, excuse me, include improvement of roads and culverts that experience like repetitive flooding. It could be the construction of safe rooms at campgrounds, public parks, mobile home parks, or schools. It would also include ensuring timely communications through like warning sirens and mass notification systems, and then as well as conducting public awareness, to the public and education to help people to be prepared to take action in case of an event. What this does is adopting the plan basically ensures eligibility to apply for a project that may be eligible for hazard mitigation funding. So it doesn't ensure as far as that project would be eligible, and it doesn't always say that there's going to be funding available. It just ensures that you would be eligible to apply for the funding.
And that's that.
Yes, so that's what we're here for today. I stand for any questions.
I'm kind of familiar with the hazard mitigation plan myself. Anything from the board? This really wraps up if we have an event, and if that event is an event, can we get money for it? In that 200, what did you say, 240?
48 page
48
document.
pages, kind of tells us that we made the effort to do the work. Now, whether or not we're going to be able to get funding, whether it's from the state or feds, I think.
Correct.
Is still up in the air. We don't know that.
Correct. So this plan basically says we know what our risks are, and then what we could possibly do to help mitigate as far as those risks.
Absolutely. Commissioner Casper, did you have something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say to Sean and Gloria, Randall was a fresh reminder of having that plan in place, right?
Yes,
Yeah, thank you.
absolutely.
Cool. Excellent. We'll get that signed.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need a motion? I think we do. I'd look for a motion to approve the
Motion to approve,
mitigation
Mr.
plan.
Chair.
Got a motion and a second. Further discussion on the mitigation plan? Hearing none. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you very much.
I'll jump into the resignations. We had a deputy who is going to resign his position. Last day will be April 20th. And then a sergeant investigator position. We received notice last Friday. His last day will be April 7th. So just want to kind of inform the board what's going on. And then we're in the process now of filling 2 3/4 time benefited positions, if you will. So interviews start tomorrow, and we only had 3 applicants. Now, if you rewind probably about 8 years ago, for a part-time intermittent position with no benefits, we had 30 to 50 applicants. So that's kind of the times we're in. But anyway, I just wanted to give everybody an update on that and let you know that we plan on filling those positions and then doing an internal and external post, and then backfilling any slots if need to be.
And unfortunately, Sheriff, that's a trend.
Correct, yeah.
And it's not a trend in Morrison County or Stearns County or Hennepin County. It's a trend in the state of Minnesota and quite honestly, the nation.
Correct. You're right, Mr. Chair. It's, you can look at the Minnesota Post Board where a lot of these positions are posted, and it's all of our neighboring counties. It's statewide. It used to be maybe a handful of positions, and now there's hundreds. So thank you. And then the third thing I just wanted to highlight on a report, we had a guest speaker. His name was Kent Williams. He had over 32 years of law enforcement experience. He was a chief in, I want to say Bartlett, Illinois. And his whole thing was he'd experienced some tragedy in his life, and I got the privilege of hearing him at a sheriff's conference last summer. And I got thinking, holy cow, if I can bring this gentleman to our agency, because he's really tailored to law enforcement. So I got thinking after hearing him, if I could bring this to Morrison County and to let our employees hear him, I think it's going to benefit the entire organization. So I made it mandatory. I've heard a few grumblings, initially, like, oh, mandatory training. But in the end, the majority of all the officers pretty much thanked us for making it mandatory. So it was really beneficial. We invited small town police departments, invited our state counterparts, and like I said, for our staff, we made it mandatory. And what was real eye-opening is that it was mandatory that you had to attend a 4-hour session. And this speaker is all about organizational wellness and mental health. And so again, we made it mandatory that you had to attend 1 4-hour session, and there was a family session that was the next day. And that wasn't mandatory. You could sign up if you wanted to. Well, before the speaker, there was approximately 13 people that were signed up. And after the mandatory session, we had 87 people, I believe.
Wow.
To include families, their kids. So it was just amazing. And this gentleman just hit the nail right on the head. A little bit about he calls it breach point, and he calls it breach point because in tactical terms, when you're going to breach, you're crossing a threshold, and you don't know what's on the other side. So there's a lot of training that gets involved, and a lot of stress. You're really on high alert. And when you cross that threshold, you don't know if you're going to be met with resistance, with weapons. You just have no idea in law enforcement, but that's what we do. And he kind of talked about, his definition was a professional pause, having a plan in place to dominate the threshold. And then when you cross over the threshold, whether as an individual or a team, you maximize everyone's wellness on the other side, and you change the environment for the better. But then he talked about how breach point tactically should be used in our personal lives. And what he meant by that is, slow things down, make sure we have a plan, make sure we pause in our own lives, put plans in place so we can flourish, and thrive and have meaningful relationships, both professionally and personally. And at the end of the day, with all his speaking, it pretty much talks about the harms of some law enforcement. In general, first responders, you know, there's a lot of drinking sometimes. Sometimes there's divorces that take place. In the extreme cases, sometimes there's suicide. So he kind of touched on all this stuff, and his training basically was to say, if you take care of yourselves, then you're better off to take care of others. So I thought it was interesting. I thought I would highlight it to the board, because usually when I'm here, we're talking about, you know, this is the mental health we're dealing with on the street. But realistically, we're not superheroes, so we need a little guidance and help once in a while too. And then we talked a little bit about, you know, again, when you're off duty, do you really need to be on high alert? Can you let your guard down? Well, again, that's crossing that threshold. And that's knowing that when you go into your home environment, we don't always need to be looking for the bad guy, right? We just need to let our guard down. And sometimes we need to hear it from someone who experienced their own tragedy and figured things out in life. So a lot of focus on serving our family and people who are close to us, maximizing their wellness and happiness, finding hobbies, of course, the importance of working out, engaging in peer support. That was a big one. You know, if you got an issue, who can you trust? Get this stuff off your chest. Because at the end of the day, if you don't, it all builds up. Sleeping well, making sure you get enough sleep, having a mentor, you know, someone you can trust and someone that can guide you. Having faith, everyone struggles. For me, you know I can trust the Lord, my Savior, and He's always going to protect me and never forsaken me. So it's just all these things that He's pushing out that we can all build on, if you will. And I've been in conversation with Matt and some of our staff here and Commissioner Lemire, and we're kind of using this as a guideline, and we're looking at how can we use similar speakers and do similar things to reach out to our entire agency here at the Government Center. So all in all, I thought it was a good thing, and I just thought it was important to highlight. So if there's any questions,
Sheriff, thank you for the conversation. We've had small conversations, the two of us, in regards to mental health in the past. Employees, staff, doesn't make any difference, but it does not just stay in one place, or in this instance, in one agency, in your office. There are other departments and so on and so forth. Mental health is a real thing in the world that we live in today, and it breaches the next office and the next office and the next office. So I very much appreciate the conversation, and I know that you've had some conversation with the administrator, and who's to say what is forthcoming, because it is something that truly does touch and affect each and every one of us. So thank you for that.
You bet, Mr. Chair. My only wish is that day one in this career and everyone's career, you could hear this speaker versus 15 years later or 25 years later.
Absolutely.
But better late than never.
Comments from the board?
Thank you for sharing that story.
Absolutely. Cool. That good, Sheriff?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Outstanding. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Keep
Thank you,
smiling.
Sheriff.
Thank you.
All right, we've got Land Services coming up next. I was thinking of a break, but then I said, nah, let's just go through it.
We can do it.
We can do it.
At our Wheaties.
All right, well, I got a lot, so buckle up.
Well, listen, like everybody else, you've got yourself comfortable now.
Yes.
Microphone's in front of you. Who are we? What are we here for? And then continue on.
Bet. My name is Amy Kowalczyk, and I'm the Morrison County Land Services Director.
I'm Darren Welly, I'm the shoreline specialist.
Good morning.
Good morning. So the first thing we have is the review and hopefully the approval of the aquatic invasive species grants for 2023. As you know, we have made this grant available to lake improvement districts and lake associations for many years now, and we do have a grant committee that takes a look at the grant applications to make sure that they are in line with our plan and will be furthering our aquatic invasive species plan. So within your packet, you should have a summary of the recommendation from the committee. And this is the overall detail page from what we had looked at. And then I'm gonna let Darren go through, just a quick overview and then talk about the carryover funds.
Sure.
So this is very similar to what you've seen in past years. Our applicants, their requested dollars and then what was recommended, they were all recommended for full funding. We were able to utilize, past carryover funds to provide full funding to all the requests, because we did have about $9,000, or $59,000 total in requests this year.
And so, Mr. Chair, if you notice down at the bottom in the lower left, we did have $19,974 in returned funds from 2022. So these were projects that were granted, but for one reason or another, part of them didn't get completed, and so we do have the requirement that they return that funding. So the decision was made because we had $59,000 worth of requests, and that we roll some of that returned funds to fully fund the requests for this year.
It's not turned back money to the state, it's turned back
No.
money to the county for the program.
That's correct.
It can't go into general fund.
Yes, it's turned back funds to that dedicated
Yes.
account, yes.
Yes.
Yes, so we budget every year $50,000. We had, the total ask was a little over 59,000. With the returned, some of the returned funds, we had opted to roll some of that to fully fund.
Were there any other agencies, groups, lids that would have made application that did not get addressed?
These were all the applications we received.
Okay.
There are, I think to answer your question, there are more out there
Yep.
that just didn't apply.
Yep,
Yes.
these are the ones that applied?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, motion on the table, is there a second?
Yes.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Further discussion?
I just want to say, Commissioner Casper and myself sit on this committee also, and Darren did a wonderful job. He made sure that all the things that were brought before us were within the instructions of the AIS grant applications. He contacted those that didn't apply to make sure, are you sure you don't want to apply? And they responded back to him, no. And the little history on the return funds, I think that was something that Commissioner Wilson kind of brought forth, because he was thinking that we should increase the funding from 50 to whatever. And then Amy came up with this idea, well, if they return funds, that we can add them funds to the next AIS grant.
Sure.
So everything went really well. The applicants, some do a really nice job with their application, and they all fall within the recommendations.
Further comments from the board?
Mr. Chair, if I
Commissioner
may,
Blaine?
I just want to make the point that, with this 59,000 in appropriations, it is fair to say or to speculate that we could have some of that 59,000 returned as we have in the past.
Yes.
That some of these projects that are being funded or to these groups may not get finished. That money would come back.
That's correct.
We may entice the same process a year from now.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Casper, did you have something?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to ask, just a refresher, is it some of the lake associations that are taking care of their own funding, like Lake Alexander? Could you refresh me on that?
Well, within lake improvement districts, there's two kind of categories, lake improvement districts and lake associations. And they each have so lake improvement districts can levy for their funding.
Okay.
And a lot of times you will see aquatic invasive species projects that benefit the entire lake that are levied on all of the property owners for some projects that are above and beyond what this funds. So this is a supplement to their overall budget. Lake associations is a voluntary membership, and generally their focus is a little bit different. And so generally they will not budget for aquatic invasive species work as much as you would see a lake improvement district do that.
Very good, thank you.
Anything further from the board? Gentlemen, this is a roll call vote. Commissioner Casper?
Yes.
Lane?
Aye.
Lemire?
Aye.
Wincher?
Aye.
And myself, Commissioner Jelinski, is an aye. That motion passes.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have one other piece to this.
Okay.
And that is, as you can see in this bottom left-hand corner with the return funds, with fully funding these grant requests, we also have additional carryover funds, a little over $10,000. And one of the things we also talked about with our Aquatic Invasive Species Committee was using some of those funds for a signing project that at some of the landings that we have control over. And so I want to defer to Darren on that project.
So what the goal will be is to work with our Public Works to evaluate these landings. Is there additional signage that we can put out there to kind of help in the AIS department here? The DNR has signs such as what you see here that they can help provide that document of the design, and we can then create these signs to then help place out in there. So the idea will be is to use some of these funds to kind of do a signage project in cooperation with Public Works at those landings that we have out there.
I like it.
Do you need an approval from us? on this
Mr.
thing?
Chair, yes. The other thing I wanted to add is Darren did have discussion with the Public Works Department, and they were willing to partner with us, and so we're very thankful for that cross-departmental cooperation. These signs would not be placed at all landings. These would not be at DNR landings. These would be at landings that Morrison County has control.
Correct.
Mr. Chair?
Sure. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve Darren to move forward with the sign project with the carryover funds from the 2022 AIS grant returns.
Got a motion. Is there a second?
Would second that.
Got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Further discussion from me would be, where does that sign come from? Does the county shop actually build it?
My understanding is there's vendors that will
Okay.
build the sign
Okay.
that they can help with. Yep.
And the county shop or the county highway department, if you will, Public Works, would install it?
Help with that, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good. Further comments from the board? Hearing none, this is a roll call vote. Commissioner Lemire?
Aye.
Commissioner Casper? Wincher?
Aye.
Blaine?
Yep.
And myself, Commissioner Jelinski, is an aye vote. That motion passes. Thank you.
Wake me up.
Thank you.
Continue.
Commissioner Blaine, can you just do that one more time?
Darren, thank you very kindly.
Thank you.
Why don't you stop back again on another day? Okay, take care.
Okay, now, Mr. Chair, I am going to circle back to our last Planning Commission meeting and bring forward a few things from that. The first one is to consider the conditional use permit request from Jerome and Mary Rose Capco. If you recall, this was to expand to a Tier 2 cattle feedlot. This was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission, and so now we're looking for your consideration.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve.
Got a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please.
In watching the process or witnessing the process here at the Planning Commission meeting here a week ago, and then I had a discussion with one of the Planning Commission members on this too, or not necessarily on this particular case, but it served as a good example when there's a discussion about expansion of a feedlot within the county and the dialogue in that permit process about recognizing acres for manure management out there. The question was asked to me, and I thought I would ask that question then. So, because the comment was made by the Planning Commission Board, by a member of the Planning Commission Board, that that an applicant has sufficient acreage to land apply manure. What is the process that guarantees that that happens and that land is not being qualified by another producer and or that property is able to accept land applied manure?
And with that question, Commissioner Blaine, are you also asking, if I understood it right, would you or I or anyone as a farmer also have that piece of property listed on our manure management plan? Is that what you said?
We can go there.
Okay.
Yeah, we can go there. I think the question that was posed to me, and I did not have full certainty on this, even as a livestock producer, former livestock producer, and a farmer now, on this, but that I would raise the question for clarity for us and for others. So how do we know with certainty that there is this many acres? How do we know with certainty that those acres are not already being claimed by maybe another part of that operation or by another producer out there? So I believe Amy will know where I'm going with this.
I think we all do.
Okay.
And a good question.
Right.
Please, Amy, if you could address that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. How we get to that answer within the staff report, there's a lot that goes into that one-line response in the staff report that tells you how many acres they have available, how many acres they need to treat nitrate, and how many acres they need to treat phosphorus. What part of a complete application is a manure management plan. And so that does include soils work. So there is soil analysis that is done on the fields that they've identified they're going to spread on, whether those are leased or they're owned, or a combination of both. So within that manure management plan, we have the soil data work to know what that can take, at what application rate it can take, and also what the nutrient content of the manure is. So that's one area. Then if they are leasing that, then we are looking also for those agreements. So they need to provide those agreements. As we receive manure management plans, we also map those. So as we receive plans, we map the fields that are being accounted for in these manure management plans. If we see overlap, and sometimes it happens where we will see one field, hey, the manure management plan for this farmer is already claiming this field, we will reach out to both producers and the landowner to find out what is going on. Are you receiving manure? Are you not? What has changed? So as these manure management plans are updated, they're submitted to us, and so we keep track of that, and so we do reconcile that to make sure there isn't double counting. Sometimes when someone has more acreage than what they need, some of those fields they identified never took or saw manure, so they are eligible to receive other. So that is something that is going on in the background in our office that our feedlot officer takes care of, that you don't necessarily see that full thing at the hearing.
To follow up on that, if I may, Amy, we also have what I like to refer to as a state-of-the-art GIS department.
Yes, we do.
And I know that we've talked about it a quadrillion different times. Our GIS department has started and/or has a program, plan, I don't know, on tracking that actually online besides that?
Yes, so our GIS department developed the map that our feedlot officer inputs into. And so that is really a partnership between those two roles to keep that map up to date. Also, we do keep up to date the feedlot map layer, so as new feedlots come online, or as some deactivate or change tiers, we actively manage that layer so we know at a glance where our registered feedlots are, what species, and what tier they are. So we manage that layer on top of the manure tracking.
And of that party's acreage that they perhaps own, and perhaps the neighbors, we also would then track that actually GIS-wise
Correct.
Also.
Yes, so as these plans come in, there's a description of the field, and then we color code all of it, so at a glance, we know what it's been claimed for.
Commissioner Blaine, did that answer that for you or not?
You know, pretty much, I think that it gives a lot of clarity out there. It does bring another question to mind, though, too. You know, with the changing landscape in agriculture and the environmental science part of what we're seeing happening in agriculture now, too, in relationship to nutrient management out there. So for as the state of Minnesota and others start to look at setting or renewing or revising thresholds for nitrogen or nitrate composition in the soil and or now especially phosphorus levels out there, who is responsible for enforcement on that? Does that become the state of Minnesota, the Department of Ag, Pollution Control Agency, or is that enforcement then sloughed to the county feedlot officer?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Are you asking as far as in the case of an over-application, if they're over-applying?
I guess where I'm going with this is, we've had discussions, this topic came up in the last 2 years when we discussed the issues surrounding the ordinance amendments in relationship to rural land, feedlot siting, things like this. And it kind of, the reveal kind of came out that we do have areas in the county that we keep an eye on because of high nitrate levels. We have areas that are identified as having very high nitrate levels that show up in water wells. I also recognize the fact that in the agricultural sector, there's becoming increased concern on managing phosphorus levels in the soils out there too. And the environmental lobby is very active on this to the point that there's a lot of attention at the legislature on this. I'm just curious whose responsibility is it, or where does that take place? That if we have, let's say we have a township in Morrison County that we have issues with high nitrate levels in wells, do we limit manure application and or maybe not just necessarily manure, but even commercial fertilizer application on that soil to protect groundwater resources out there? And whose responsibility is it for enforcement on that issue?
Mr. Chair?
Please.
It's kind of a three-pronged approach for that. And so as a registered feedlot, you must be notifying the feedlot officer when you are spreading, so we're aware of that. Also, as part of the feedlot rules that we are delegated to enforce, the producers must keep records of their manure applications. where it went, at what rate, when, all of that. And so we have access to those documents. If we have reason to believe that an over-application has happened or they're not following the manure management plan, then we're generally going to ask for an assist from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. In the case of Morrison County that has the high nitrate issues, and it's very well known that we have pockets of that, then the Department of Ag steps in also, and they have put forward some rules regarding application times and application rates for those areas. And so it's really kind of a fluid thing. I don't know that there's really one agency that drills into that specifically. Rather, it's three that are working together to work with that producer.
Okay.
Did that answer that?
It does, and I'm grateful for the time to investigate that, Mr. Chair, and I know it's borderline relevant to the application here by the Capcos for their permit, but it created a segue for me to complete this.
Absolutely, thank you. Further comment on this item from the Planning Commission? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
The next item I have is to consider the interim use permit request from John and Laura Pansky. This was to allow a home decor shop, and this was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission with two conditions. And those conditions were a porta potty serviced by a licensed provider shall be on site and made available for customer use. And the interim use permit shall sunset when the applicants, John and Laura Pansky, no longer own the property.
I'd look for a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I would second that.
I've got a motion, I've got a second. Is there further discussion on this? Commissioner Wincher?
Thank you. Going back to this condition, this one, they're only open like 6 days out of the month, right?
That's correct.
And so, again, I'm just questioning whether, and it was questioned on the Planning Commission about having a porta potty there for 6 days, and I don't know anything about that, or if you can just rent them for 6 days. I question that condition because of the fact that they're only open 6 days a month. And, again, it was said that they have a nice area. They've been really stewards of the township. That one, again, I just question whether we should require them to have a porta potty for that length of time.
Further comment, Commissioner Blaine?
And Mr. Chair, question in reference to procedure, does this board have the ability to eliminate that condition? In reference to Commissioner Wincher and the dialogue that took place, and the circumstances surrounding this permit, and knowing the applicants and how they conduct and take care of their property, I would be willing to amend my motion and strike that first condition, but leave the condition that is necessary, that is condition number 2 in this, and so that we'd only have one condition for the Panskys, and that would be that this permit would expire when they no longer own the property.
And I have no issue with that at all, although the Planning Commission did have a pretty good heart-to-heart with that, and there seems to me that there was kind of a yes and no, although it was added as a condition, there was kind of a yes or no, and comments made of people coming to their store, if you will, and having to use the facilities. And of course, the Pansky said, don't worry, they can use our house. And it was made very clear from the Planning Commission, that might sound good, but it's probably not going to last because it's going to be kind of a problem. And I just want to say that, that's all. I have no issues, but I just want to say that Commissioner Blaine.
So, thank you for that, and I was alongside you there at that meeting and witnessed all that dialogue. And this is another one of those instances, I'll just say, where maybe that becomes a stretch of oversight. I support this business and this project or endeavor that they're taking on, but I don't believe it's the responsibility of government to tell them how to run their business. I know the individuals. If they want to start out this business and they're open, let's say 3 days out of a month, and they get, over those 3 days, they get 3 individuals who say, "Can I use your bathroom?" And they're fine with that, but they find out later that, I really don't want these people using my bathroom. They'll take appropriate activities or appropriate actions because they'll understand the importance of having those amenities for the success of their business. And I have a trouble when we allow somebody to do something, but I'm going to tell you how to do it. And we know how it's government, little overreach here, and we'll tell you how to run your business right after we give you a permit. So
Absolutely.
I'm done with my pulpit now.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I believe Commissioner Blaine amended his motion. Is that correct?
That is correct.
It was not been seconded.
That's correct. It was initially seconded by Commissioner Casper, but the amended
First time.
motion was not.
Oh, the second time you did also? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
You second the amended motion?
Sorry, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Just one.
Yes,
I
please.
can't see what it's zoned. Is it A?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I got.
Anything further? Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion shall pass.
All right, thank you. Last item I have for you is to consider the conditional use permit request for Morrison County to amend the existing conditional use permit. This was also recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. The scope of this was pretty narrow. It was really just to address one condition. And so the Planning Commission recommended approval with these 3 conditions. Any new fill area at the facility must be located at least 200 feet from the nearest property line. Solid waste management facility shall operate under an approved MPC solid waste permit and report to Little Falls Township Board when a landfill permit application is made or modified.
I'd look for a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I'd second that.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Commissioner Wincher?
Thank you. Again, this one had a lot of discussion too, and I appreciate the open to the public hearing. A lot of these landowners came there. They had good dialogue. They had good questions. None of them really were against this. They just had a few questions about this buffer with the trees, on the one side. And I know working all these years at the landfill, Jeff and our county engineer will do to work with them. I don't see any problem with that one. It was addressed about tipping fees. And, why are we letting all these counties come in with the tipping and to shorten our time with the open landfill? And I just no one really asked that question, so I have our county engineer, it looks like, if we were just to quit, and again, this has nothing to do with this conditional, but that was addressed, if we would just quit having our haulers come in, or other haulers from other counties, what would the cost be to the county, and what would be the cost to anyone that's using their services, whether it's City of Little Falls? And I'm hoping that maybe our county engineer who's here could address that for those people that ask that question, because some just don't understand why we have the other counties bringing in our garbage from them. Let's just keep it here confined to Morrison County.
And Commissioner, you're 100% correct. The engineer is here and is coming forward. I will ask him to introduce himself, and we will see if he can give us an answer. I don't mean to put him on the spot, but we'll ask for the question.
Mr. Chair, before the esteemed engineer gives input on this, I would want to respond to Commissioner Wincher too, because I had this dialogue also with some individuals from that hearing and outside of, who didn't attend that hearing.
Sure.
But I also was very clear with them that this county board has to give approval to the management of how much solid waste will come into that facility. Obviously, we have that discussion with the county engineer, with Mr. Meyer, who manages that facility, but in the end, they look for approval or dialogue with us at the end that says, this is the amount that we're going to allow to come in here, and that becomes also part of their permitting process, I believe, but now I will look to our esteemed engineer.
And Commissioner Blaine, I believe you are 100% correct. And with that said, we will look to our engineer.
Good morning.
Esteemed.
Now we're getting a little big there, but.
Morning, Tony.
Good morning,
Morning,
Mr.
Tony.
Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Because of the nature of the question, I want to point one thing out. Regardless of if we accept out-of-county waste or not, the request to move our border from 300 to 200 would still exist.
Exactly.
So what we're doing is we're creating efficiencies inside our landfill. That's the most efficient way to extend the life and eventually potential revenue for that facility. So it makes the most sense. And ultimately what we're looking at here is aligning with state statute. Those statutes are written by the MPCA, one of the most stringent agencies inside the United States. And when we reviewed those conditions that were set in our existing conditional use permit, we thought it would be pertinent to align with that statute. And that's kind of where it all started. But when you look at how we started accepting out-of-county waste, you kind of go back to the history of our facility, and some of you are aware of it, and maybe some of you are not. But that facility started in 1970. It was actually owned by the Area Council of Government, which was a bunch of cities and townships essentially up and down the Trunk Highway 10 and 371 corridor. And they ran that facility, an unlined facility, up into the late 80s. Around 1988, the county took that facility over. We actually acquired it for $1, but we also acquired all the liabilities. So we acquired a landfill that was unlined, putting contaminants into the groundwater, and the county started making improvements on that. In '93, the county closed that unlined portion of the landfill and started building a lined portion. And after that, we started adding corrective active action systems, which started cleaning up some of our groundwater issues. So the county itself has been a steward of the land and a steward of the area for improvements to the groundwater. The groundwater now is cleaner than it's ever been since that landfill has existed, and we continue to make those improvements. But when you look at the operation from a business perspective, all that waste coming into your facility is a revenue. And regardless of where that revenue comes in from, that facility still has operating expenses. So we do our best to try to manage that. So you go over the years, there was a time where the county actually didn't take in much out-of-county waste, but we also had some larger manufacturers in here. And since some of those manufacturers no longer exist, your Hennepin Papers, your Larson boats, your Crestliner boats, those are waste or revenue sources that no longer come into your county landfill. So over the years, there's been business decisions made to implement different ways of continuing to fund the landfill or bring those revenues in. One of those is bringing in outside waste. So when you look at some of the benefits of bringing in outside waste to the county, so what it does is it makes our facility a regional facility. It's not just Morrison County. We have other counties bringing waste into here. So by having it a regional facility, when we go through the permitting process with state agencies, MPCA particularly, our facility now has more emphasis. We're serving a greater population. Another thing, when you think about it, the MPCA is very stringent and puts in a lot of regulations that we have to abide by. Different groundwater testing, different design items, different permitting. We're going through the 10-year permitting process right now. But all those regulatory items have considerable cost outside of your normal operating expenses. So by having a larger waste stream or revenue stream, you're able to transfer those regulatory fees across a larger portion, which then affects your tipping fee differently versus maybe just Morrison County. So kind of what we're scratching at there, it allows us, by accepting that out-of-county waste, it allows us to subsidize our inter-county waste. So when you look at our tipping fees, Morrison County, a licensed hauler for county residents, are tipping at $65. Our out-of-county waste our tipping fees at $82. So that's a substantial amount of increase for bringing that out-of-county waste into our facility and essentially using our airspace. And what that does is allows us to keep those tipping fees lower, but essentially subsidizing it. So when you look at potentially removing out-of-county waste, which I think is some of the people are referring to, the lifespan of our landfill, and what you'd start doing is you'd start asking, well, how much money do you need to make up? I ran some rough numbers. They're very generic, but to give you an idea, this includes industrial waste, but I didn't back that number out. Industrial waste has a different tipping fee, but our tipping fees both from the county of Morrison and out of county are north of $3 million. So our out of county waste generates over $1 million, about $1.2 million is what that revenue brings in. So that's a substantial amount of revenue for our facility. So if you were to say, shut the doors to out-of-county tipping or out-of-county waste, you're no longer going to have that tipping fee. So you need to make that revenue up. So if you were to do that, our tipping fees for inter-county waste would go from $65 to north of $100 a ton. So that's a substantial increase. Now, obviously, there's a lot of different ways to operate a business. So we have different mechanisms that we can use to support our landfill. One of them is tipping fees. Another would be a household assessment, which we don't currently have, or assessing businesses for our landfill, which we currently don't do. Or you could go straight to your levy ask, which is across all your population in the county. So you look at making up, say, $1.2 million, $1.4 million, that's potentially a 7% levy increase if you were to not utilize those funds. So from a business perspective and a way to keep our tipping fees economical, that out-of-county waste, that revenue it generates really supports your community. But ultimately, it's a decision that needs to be made, that those funds do come at a cost for the life of your facility. We're looking at this expansion. It adds, we'll call it 10 years. Well, 2 of those years are taken by out-of-county waste, maybe almost 3. But your cost benefits of that is just something that we have to be weighed and that we acknowledge very, very carefully.
Thank you, Tony. Commissioner Winchard, did that answer that question for you?
Well, for me it did, yes, thank you. Just to put that out there, what the change would be as far as local dollars versus bringing it outside. Thank you.
Commissioner Lemire, did you have something?
Tony, that was a great answer. You did a wonderful job. I'm amazed at how well you know landfill stuff in such a short time.
We're learning.
So you get 2 thumbs up on that reply. Also, I want to bring up the fact that when we do an expansion, a cell expansion, we don't bond for it either.
Correct. The tipping fees that we generate, those have gone to landfill improvements. You've gone to, our redesign, our re-permitting, those are all revenues that are generated internally, tipping fees. Our levy ask for the landfill operation is very, very minute, less than $300 or $300,000 for 2023. So that's where those revenues come in and help us improve that facility.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Sir.
Tony, I'm going to throw one at you that's going to sound a little on the negative side, but it was talked about at the hearing, if you will. And I think in fairness, we need to at least visit it.
Sure.
One of the individuals gave testimony about garbage blowing onto their property. Quite honestly, I'm going to stand back and I'm going to say that I personally have said time after time after time, we have the cleanest landfill that I have ever seen in my life. And to hear someone, anyone, this was a neighbor, no big deal, talk about paper and whatever that is blowing under their property kind of surprised me, which is fine. It's how we could not have paper blow anywhere is beyond my wildest belief. During that conversation, there was conversation by the Planning Commission, well, should we plant trees? And of course, the answer to that was trees will never grow, or at least won't grow fast enough. Should we build a fence? Have we planted trees, et cetera? I would just ask if you would comment on that. That's all I'm looking for is a comment, and I think we owe it to the neighbor to at least have commented on that topic.
Well, I wanted to be clear, and we mentioned this at the conditional use permit hearing. That was the first we've heard of these complaints.
Thank you.
Never been approached before that, so it was news to us. And what we touched on at the conditional use permit hearing was that, well, we'll evaluate our operations. What can we be doing better? Obviously, they have some items that we would like addressed, so we're going to evaluate those with Little Falls Waste and Mr. Meyer and see what we can do better. And, you know, when they talk about the vegetative screening, there is a vegetative screening. You know, at the meeting, it was said, oh, you know, maybe there's some trees that are 8, 10 feet tall. Well, after a little additional review, those trees are actually 20 feet tall. So either way, we're going to evaluate what we have. Obviously, right now, it's very tough to go out and do a site review with the amount of snow we've received. But, you know, this summer, we'll go out there and we'll review what we have. And if there's some places for improvement, you know, we can evaluate making those if we think there'll be a benefit. You know, the other thing, the fence was mentioned. I think both the neighbor to the north and the county aren't sure if that would be the best solution. They do utilize their property for moving their manure hoses and stuff like that, which could be a drag for their operations per se.
Yep.
But needless to say, you know, we're going to evaluate it internally. If there's improvements we can make, we will.
And Tony, thank you. And I want to add, thank you for also adding, that was the first time that anyone had ever heard of a complaint. I have yet to hear of a complaint of anything like that. But that being said, we heard it.
Absolutely.
And I truly believe we needed it addressed. It's addressed, and that's, I don't need to go any further with that. Anyone have anything further regarding this? Commissioner Casper.
Mr. Chair, I would just say to Tony and to Mr. Meyer, you guys, the county is in good hands, and we appreciate it. You guys do a knockout job there. Thank you.
I appreciate that. You know, Mr. Meyer does a fantastic job, him and his company, Little Falls Waste, and, you know, their employees do a fantastic job out there. And, you know, obviously with that feedback, we're going to try to make some adjustments and continue to do a good job.
Thank you, Tony. Anything further from the board?
Just, can I ask one
Please.
question on these, number three condition report to Little Falls Township Board? Is that something that we've always had to do?
Yes, so over the life of the conditional use permits, you know, originally the Little Falls Township did their own zoning, so the original conditional use permit was issued through them. The one I noticed was 1995. At that time, it had around 6 conditions. 2013, the county issued a new conditional use permit, and that's where these current 3 conditions lied. Some of them occurred in both the 95 and the 2013.
Okay.
So all of them make sense. They're things we follow. We operate our facility underneath the MPCA permit. We're in the process of re-permitting the facility right now. Happens once every 10 years. And we've notified the Little Falls Township or their board and supervisors that we're going through that process. And regardless if that was a condition, we want to be stewards to the community in that area, so we'd be having these conversations with Little Falls Township regardless if that was inside those conditions.
Sure.
Thank you, Tony.
Commissioner Blaine.
Mr. Chair, you asked for any further comments on this, and I have to reiterate a comment I made to some individuals after the discussion on this, and the talk of waste that we had never heard about, blowing around or trash or things like that, and I use that opportunity to inform some individuals that the neighbors around this facility and the people that live around there, their greatest asset is that Morrison County owns and operates that landfill. And the work that has been done by the commitment of not only the taxpayers, but leadership of the county and through Public Works at this facility over the years has made their property and the health, safety, and welfare of the people who live around there very beneficial. As Mr. Hennan says, when we look at the work that's been done by the county and in cooperation with Pollution Control Agency, with test well monitoring, and that we have cleaner water coming out of there now than ever before, and the history with that facility. The best thing that ever happened for those people that live around there was when the decision was made for Morrison County to buy that and take care of that property. And so I just wanted to share that same conversation I had earlier about that for those people to maybe stop and think a little bit about their neighbors. And their neighbor of Morrison County is a very good thing for those property owners there. And we don't, as a county, we don't take that lightly.
Thank you. Anything further from the board? All right, we've got a motion, a second, have pretty good discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Tony, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Tony.
For
Absolutely.
those answers, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And
Thank
Amy,
you.
thank
All
you. Thank you very, very much. All right, we're going to look to the administrator for the administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first item within your board packet is a resolution. We discussed this at length, I believe, at planning session last week, as well as there's a nice article on the Morrison County Record regarding this topic, and it is to expand the reach of the opioid settlement. I wasn't clear if it was approved for a consent agenda item, and when not clear, I put it in the regular agenda. But unless there's further discussion on this resolution.
Further discussion on the opioid resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Got a motion, got a second? Or rather, excuse me, is there a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Further discussion on the resolution dealing on the opioids. Hearing none, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The next one received some correspondence lately. It was titled the Kudos Letter to the County. It was sent to the chair as well as the Director of Health and Human Services, and it was congratulating us on our staff reporting that we did over the past year. 32 reports, covered some large areas. I just wanted to pass that on, and what a great job our Health and Human Services Department is doing.
Fantastic.
Great.
Fantastic stuff.
My third item, gentlemen, is last week on Wednesday, we've had much discussion about the auditor-treasurer position and the future of the auditor-treasurer position. The board passed a resolution in February, I believe on the 21st, changing it from elected to appointed, and in that process, by statute, there's a 30-day period, which at time the county could receive a petition with 10% of the registered voters signing, which would revert the board's decision and move it back to being elected for that action. On Wednesday, a petition was dropped off. By petition rules, there can only be 10 signatures per page, so the petition had 2,400 right at about 2,400 names. So the petition was about 270 pages long because of the 10-name minimum or max. And some of the pages weren't filled out completely, which is all in compliance. That's just fine. So I just wanted to share what the initial receive was, and the receipt back to those who delivered it was that. It is now being audited by our office to ensure that the petition itself was prepared properly and that the signatures on the petition are valid. So I just give an update to the board today. We expect to have this petition completely audited by the end of the week. If there are further questions, we will consult with our county attorney as well as the Secretary of State's office as necessary.
Thank you for that, Matt. Questions? Okay.
And my last item, Mr. Chair, well, I didn't say this. I'll be leaving for AMC tomorrow for a leadership summit, and so I'll be out away from the county, but available. And then my last item, if I may.
Please.
So as noted before this meeting, today is Zach's last board cover here for the county board. So if we could just take a minute and see Zach off.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Zach, this is all about you, buddy.
This is your, make sure you, it took 2.5 years, but finally got something about me.
Finally.
So we will, Zach, come on up, please. We were in good hands. And I'm hopeful that we will continue to be in good hands. As we were notified, I think last week, that Zach will be departing the Morrison County Record. I believe moving closer to home for an opportunity that presented before him. But as I commonly refer to our imperatives, resident-centric structure. The county exists for the people. We exist for the residents of Morrison County. With them, without them, there'd be no need for our county staff, and all the services we provide. Zach is who connects us to our residents. And he takes the messages and the actions by the board, and he conveys that to our residents. And he is the conduit. He's the quiet professional that comes in purple most days, always cheering for the Vikings. But really, he is the connective tissue. And we are so fortunate to have a member of the media who takes our story and tells it as is, without interpretation or emotion, and conveys the board and the county's actions to our residents. I only know Zach. This is my first interaction with the media from this position. I can only hope that the person who falls in behind you offers us the same level of professionalism. But gentlemen, today I would like to present Zach a certificate of appreciation from the county. And this is on behalf of the board, Zach. And I'm going to just mention this just before I read it. And this citation is the citation that we use for our county employees. And that's deliberate. It's deliberate in what we think of you, Zach. And I know that you're the media and we can never, own you, but boy, we'd sure like to call you a member of our team. So thank you for that, and thank you for being a member of the Morrison County team and helping to keep our residents connected with our board and the rest of the county staff. So this certificate is awarded to Zach Hacker in recognition of your contributions assisting Morrison County in providing cost-effective, high-quality services in a friendly, respectful manner. Thank you for all that you've done in making Morrison County a place that our residents are proud to call home. Thank you, Zach.
All right. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Matt. That was very cool. Zach, what can I tell you? Thank you very much. Everything that Matt just got done saying is absolutely true. You have written it down, whether it makes anyone on this board look good or bad, doesn't make any difference, doesn't matter one bit. Tremendous professionalism. And I look to you and I look and I say, thank you. You absolutely are the person that has written whatever it is that you wrote. You didn't say, well, I got to make this person look good. It didn't matter. You wrote it down exactly how it was, or make that person look bad at the same time. You did a tremendous job. I am going to miss you. And I want to say thank you very much, and I wish you nothing but the best. Board.
And again, Zach, throughout your years here, I've always made those comments. Anytime I see your article, I don't even question what you put in there because it's what we've said. You don't, put this word in extra. You go by the facts, and I tell you can't ask for a better reporter than yourself. So again, you will be missed, and I hope the one who replaces you can get to your standards and do the same thing. So thank you.
Yeah, the same as these two just said, we appreciate everything you do. You're very accurate in your writings, and we appreciate that. We appreciate that very much. Even if, someone says something wrong, it's printed right. So, meaning that it was printed in the wrong, however they said it. But we appreciate you very much, and we wish you the best of luck on your next endeavor.
Commissioner Blaine.
Zach,
30
yeah,
seconds.
It's won't happen. Time's up. No, no. You are that beacon of professionalism in the world of journalism, and I'm not I don't know that much about journalism, but I thoroughly enjoy the accuracy that you provide in your work without embellishment. And I guess the other, so as everyone says, we're going to miss that. That will be a challenge for the Morrison County Record to be able to continue to run, because he set the bar really high, and we're the beneficiaries of that. But I guess the thing for me personally, and from the selfish part of me, I will miss you coming into our boardroom or into our meetings. You carry yourself with a very positive attitude. You always have a smile on your face. You greet everyone. People like you because you're you. Don't lose that aspect. I really wish there was some way we could tie you down here, but you're a good man, and you'll do well wherever you go.
Commissioner Casper.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Zach, we live in an age where most of media is slanted and sloped. I've just been with you for 3 months, and you show well. You do very well. The only thing that could be better is if the Vikings would win the Super Bowl. So thank you, Zach. We will miss you. Godspeed to you.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate this. Obviously, I didn't expect it at all, but and thank you guys. The biggest thing is, you guys have made it easy. You guys, anytime I've had any questions after the fact or had any kind of follow-up I've needed, you guys have all been very open and just very, very easy to approach. And whether it was something that I needed to follow up on for a story or even just chat about, I appreciate all of you and really and all the staff at the county very much. Everybody's always been really receptive, gotten back to me really quick when I've had questions, and it really makes my job a lot easier. So I appreciate you guys, and I know that the county here is in good hands with you guys and all the staff here. So thanks.
Thanks, Zach.
Zach, I'm just going to ask one more thing of you before you leave. One more thing. Now, you've done it from that side ever since you've been here. Why don't you come and do it on this side? Take a photo with the board.
Yeah, I'd love that.
You know what? We'll let you sit in the middle chair, and then you.
Absolutely.
And we'll stand behind you.
I hope that new job goes well.
Yeah, I do too.
It will.
Yeah.
They're getting a gem.
I appreciate it.
Right in the center, remember that.
All right.
That's great. We got to get it centered.
All right.
She took a movie.
Yeah.
We're gonna make sure Tabitha sends this over. Terry's gonna have to do a story now.
Terry's gonna have to, because I'm not gonna do it myself. I appreciate it.
Put it on the front page.
Yeah.
Only $1.
Yeah.
Zach, keep up the good work.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate
You're awesome.
it. Yeah.
That's
Thank
mine.
you, guys.
I think this is me.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, then we got, then I've been sitting, no wonder I've been, my chair.
Chair's all
I
goofed
knew,
up.
I thought it felt fine.
There we go. Here's Blaine always switching the chairs
That's
around.
who it is. He's
Oh,
the one.
oh,
He
this
likes
one
playing
is.
musical chairs.
And then I will look to the administrator.
Concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Matt. All right, gentlemen, our next item of business is going to be our committee reports. Our committee report should take us from April 2nd through the 15th. April 2nd through the 15th, I'm going to get things started with April 4th at 8:30 in the morning. We've got a planning meeting here at the Government Center in the boardroom. At 6 o'clock that same evening, we've got a Planning Commission Board of Adjustment meeting right here in the boardroom. On Thursday, the 6th, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I have a State Emergency Communications Board Legislative Committee meeting. That's virtual. On Friday, April 7th, at 8:30 in the morning, we have a Public Works Planning meeting at Public Works. On April 11th, at 9 o'clock in the morning, we have a County Board meeting here in the County Boardroom. On the 13th, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I have a Central Minnesota Emergency Services Board Next Generation 911 virtual meeting. On the 14th, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I have a Central Minnesota Emergency Services Board RAC meeting. And as it is right now, that is all I have. Commissioner Wincher.
All right, and if anybody cares, on the 2nd, I'll be at this VFW in Royalton, the Senior Center. It's a meal that we give out for the Lions Club.
Excellent.
That starts at 11. So if you know of anybody, I'm not supposed to do this, but if you have any seniors that may want to come, you're invited by me. So you'll get a free lunch out of that.
Are we seniors? Because we're 60 plus.
You got okay. We are. On Monday, Little Falls Township will be having a Veterans Trail meeting at the Little Falls Township at 6 o'clock. On the 5th, Bellevue Township will be having a meeting at 7 o'clock for the DNR Veterans Trail. And another one here, we're good on it. On the 13th, Larson Abstract is celebrating their 100 years celebration. I'll probably show up, that'll be at 4 to 6 at the Great River Arts Center. And that's all I have.
Okay, Commissioner Lemire.
All righty. 2nd through the 15th.
2nd through the 15th of April.
On the 10th, I got a staff mental health enhancement meeting. It's in the administrative large conference room, 2 o'clock. Also on the same day, Yellow Ribbon Committee, monthly committee, 3:30 at the Little Falls Legion. There's a department head meeting on the 12th at 8:30, the boardroom. I don't know if anyone said that or not. And that's all I got.
Thank you. Commissioner Blaine.
I believe, other than saying that I wish everybody a happy Easter on the 9th, the only other thing I can say is, this will be a public service announcement there will be, the Rosemeyer Center for State and Local Government will be having a forum. We'll be holding a forum on April 12th, at 7 o'clock that evening. And this might be of interest to the county board and/or other decision makers. Our speaker that evening will be Julie Tesh, who is the executive director of the Minnesota Center for Rural Policy and Development. And she will be there to discuss with the public about issues facing rural Minnesota, and how rural communities and counties and units of government then bring these issues to either state government or to a decision point there. So I'll just put that plug in for that. Other than that, I do not have anything else to add.
Thank you. Commissioner Casper?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, I just have one thing, and that's on the 13th, the trails meeting at 6:30 in the evening.
Okay. Anything else that needs to come before this board?
Mr. Chair.
Yes?
Just one other item for the calendar. On Thursday, April 13th, the Morrison County is sponsoring a blood drive for the Red Cross here in our boardroom from 9 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. There are approximately 16 spots left available. Just wanted to get that word out for those interested in donating blood.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Anything further from the board? Hearing nothing, gentlemen, it's 11:35. I am going to release us. Thank you. Meeting